Hello and welcome to the show, and we start with this, the Aston Martin DBR1. Now I'm going to get the money bit out of the way first with this thing, because it costs ridiculous, silly, stupidly high amounts of money. This is 6 million credits. Now if you're looking for sort of value for money for performance, yeah, whatever you want to call it, no, you're not going to be looking at a car like this. This is, after all, only a C-Class car. An 8,000 credit Mitsubishi GTO will be a lot faster than it around the track. But let's face it, you're not buying one of these because of its performance. These cars are so expensive because they are, one, incredibly rare. I believe there are 5 of these. It's 4 or 5. One caught fire at one race, but I think it all got rebuilt from what I'm reading on the internet. So yeah, there are only sort of 5 of these things ever made, which makes them, yeah, incredibly rare. And of course, because they are highly sought after and they are so rare, when one does go up for sale, people will pay an awful lot of money for them. And I mean, I kind of get it with cars like these. I mean, it's a very sort of a historic car. It's the only car from Aston Martin ever to have won Le Mans outright. It won in 1959, beat the Ferraris. In fact, Carroll Shelby was driving it. That's the guy who made the AC Cobras and the incredibly powerful Mustangs. And I have to say, it is a very good looking car as well. They don't really make cars like this anymore. It's not my favourite of the classic cars or the classic race cars. I would still personally prefer a Shelby Daytona. However, I do really quite like this Aston Martin. However, what is it like to drive? Well, first of all, scary, because it's worth an awful lot of money. I can't imagine if you own one of these you take it out too often. It has 254 horsepower, it only weighs 1,900 pounds, so it's not particularly powerful. However, it doesn't weigh very much. It is important to take into consideration this is a 55-year-old car. It does not handle like a modern Le Mans car, let's put it like that. It is not an easy thing to drive. I mean, you're talking 55-year-old chassis, suspension, brakes. For its age, yeah, it's quite good. I mean, it wallows a little bit through corners. It's not the easiest thing in the world to drive. However, it is fairly controllable. Speed-wise, I would benchmark. Normally, before I do one of these, I benchmark all the cars so I get the statistics. I can never say that word. From Forza. However, I can't afford these cars to benchmark them because it would be like loads of money, and I don't have that much. So I don't know what the statistics are on this car. However, it is fairly quick. I mean, yes, it is a C-Class, and that's primarily because of the handling and the braking. It is still a fairly good car. It's fairly enjoyable to drive. The steering wheel is ridiculous. I love old car steering wheels. It's just, they're huge. Anyway, we move on to its biggest rival. This is the Ferrari 250 Testa Rossa. This won Le Mans 3 times. It would have won 4 times in a row, but it was the Aston Martin that stopped it. Now, this costs 8 million credits. Yes, that's even more than the Aston Martin. And in fact, in the real world, this is the most expensive car ever sold. In fact, 2 250 Testa Rossas are at the top of that leaderboard. The car sold for a couple of years ago, I think it was in 2010, for $16.4 million. That's silly, ridiculously big money again. If you sort of add inflation, there was a Bugatti that was sold like in the 80s that would technically be worth more now. But yeah, in the real world, this is the most expensive car ever sold at auction. It is, that sort of money is insane. And again, you're paying for the rarity. There aren't too many of these cars around. There are more of these than there are of the Aston Martins. And also sort of desirability. It is a very famous race car. It won Le Mans 3 times. It's an interesting looking car. I wouldn't say it was as good looking as the Aston Martin. I'm not a particular fan of the sort of the weird wings that sort of go out over the wheels but aren't attached to the main body. It kind of looks a little bit weird. A fun fact about this car that I read on the internet, in 1965, sort of after they'd finished racing these cars, they'd moved on. These were sort of considered obsolete race cars. You know, they weren't really much good for anything. You could buy one of these for $4,000. Now, considering, yeah, okay, inflation, that would make it a little bit more. $4,000 for a Testa Rossa that's now worth, well, 16.5 million. That would have been the bargain of the century, of the whatever you want to call it. That's incredible to think. However, what is this car like to drive? Well, again, it's an old car, 50s, 60s, are slightly older than the Aston Martin, so you have all the inherent problems of old suspension, old brakes, and old chassis. It isn't as good as the Aston Martin, I have to say. It's quite a lot more of a handful through the corners, and it's just not got the grip. Like it wants to go sort of sideways in the middle of corners, which is quite scary. It is faster in a straight line. It's faster accelerating as well. It has got 300 horsepower, so it's got sort of 50 more than than the Aston Martin. It weighs a tiny bit more, but it's both near enough the same. Out of the two, personally, I would prefer the Aston Martin. It is a nicer car to drive. I think it's a better looking car. The Ferrari is a bit better sounding, I will give it that, but it is really a handful. It's a very, very tricky car to drive. I can see why it was probably faster at Le Mans, because I would imagine its top speed is a bit better than the Aston Martin, and it will get there faster. And Le Mans, the old Le Mans anyway, was included some very, very long straights in which the Ferrari would have been able to pull out a rather big lead. However, it is now time to hand these cars over to the Stig and see what sort of lap times they can get around the test track. Now, expectation-wise, both of these cars are C-Class. The Aston Martin has the slightly higher PI, so they're going to be down towards the bottom of our leaderboard because I don't think we've only had a couple of cars in C-Class that have actually run around here. Now, it is important to consider these cars are Le Mans cars as well, which means they were designed for sort of straight line speed, which means the gearing is horrendously long on a track like this. I mean, the test track isn't particularly like a short track. There are quite a few straights, but even here, I think the Aston Martin only got out of second briefly. The Ferrari is a little bit better, but still, they've both got incredibly long gears, which makes it very, very tricky around this track. As you see, they come down towards the hammerhead, and they're both fairly close at this point. I have to say, I was surprised. I mean, there's about 50 PI difference between the Ferrari and Aston Martin, and yeah, the Ferrari was holding on relatively well. You can see which car, or how hard a car is to drive, by how many cones knocked over generally, as to how much trouble Stig had with each car. As they come up towards the follow-through now, the Ferrari is a little bit ahead. I will point out, as normal, my computer can be funny when trying to run two clips at once, so it can be a little bit hard to sync them up. As we see, as they went through the follow-through there, the Ferrari ended up going a little bit sideways and may have fallen off the road slightly. You can see how hard that thing is to drive, because when you turn it at high speeds, the back end just wants to slip out, and Stig didn't quite catch it in time for that one. To come around the second to last corner, is now up towards the final corner. The Aston Martin has got a little bit of a lead, and there they are across the line. Now, yes, the Ferrari did fall off the road, but that was still the fastest lap time Stig did with that car. It really wasn't an easy thing to drive. So, now it is time for the all-important lap times. And the Aston Martin did well. It's not a particular surprise. I'm going to be honest that these cars are towards the bottom. A 1:26.6, while the Ferrari Testa Rossa did a 1:27.2. Fairly close between the two of them, I have to say. It's faster than a 205 T16, but doesn't really keep up with the Evos and the Imprezas that we have on that leaderboard. Not a real surprise between those two cars, I'm going to be honest. I mean, they are very tricky to drive, or to drive fast anyway, because yeah, this is how old the cars are, how old the suspension and that is, and the brakes aren't particularly fantastic either. However, that is it for this video, guys. Thank you very much for watching. Next week, if you could leave your suggestions for what rivalry you would like seen sort of put into a video, we will have a look through and we will pick our favourites. However, until then, goodbye.